Guests and crew, each has a job to do, and they set about doing it. A ship and water, fresh salt breezes, peace, harmony, excitement. This may be New York, but on the Italia, the farewell is arrivederci. It would seem that God created seagulls just to bid holiday voyagers an exciting and graceful farewell. On the Italia,
made canyon with walls of concrete, glass, and steel is downtown New York City, Manhattan Island to be exact, and the heart of New York's financial district. Sold by the Indians in 1626 for $24 worth of trinkets, here millions of dollars change hands every day. The old Trinity Church still stands as a memory of revolutionary days. It recalls to us the fact that just around the corner, George Washington took the oath of office as first president of the country, that the first U.S. Congress convened here so many years ago. Here the great names ring out in the mind. Jefferson, Hamilton, Franklin, great men all with great visions, but very shrewd at business too. This building houses the New York Stock Exchange. The titans who founded our country would have understood very clearly the financial trade.
It's all traffic jams and subway crushes and pure unadulterated rat race. And what do you call it, New York? And 3rd Avenue today, streamlined, changing every day. Wise guys say this will be a great town if they ever finish it, but that's New York. Wait a year or so and you'll see this mess become the looking through a hole in a fence at a hole in the ground. Now we turn to one of the most stylish thoroughfares on earth, Central Park South, where you'll see chic women and smartly dressed men. Like this debonair gent in his black mohair West Coast version of the all-American boy's taste. On to Park Avenue, once the most exclusive, ritziest avenue in America. Now slowly but surely making way for big business in big buildings of aluminum and glass, like this one. And here's an guard's coat. Busy fella. Now, Miss Jones, sign the letter, love and kisses. Visitors to New York invariably flock to see the wonders of Rockefeller Center, sometimes called Radio City, a city within a city. Restaurants, theaters, shops. Its structural beauties, its... Oh, yeah, where are we? Oh, yes, its structural beauties. The RCA building, 70 stories high, which is about 67 more stories than they've thought up so far for television. Some of the buildings are named for friendly nations, like the Palazzo d'Italia, or the Maison Française, or the British Empire building. Here's a dressed right young man. This chap is going places. I just wish I could place him. The arts and sciences are well represented in New York. By less than 3 miles apart are the New York Public Library, the Museum of Natural History, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Museum of Modern Art, and newest of all, the Guggenheim, one of the last great works of architect Frank Lloyd Wright. Some call it a living epitaph to his greatness. Others insist he built it this way because he hated museums. You see, you view the paintings from a spiral ramp, which critics say distorts your perspective of the art. But not even spiral staircase. Further east now, This you will recognize as the United Nations, scene of many a Cold War skirmish. This is Broadway, Gotham's famous theater district, scene almost every evening of happy theatergoers, scene almost every day of frustrated ticket shoppers. Stiff Neck territory, the 1,250-foot Empire State Building. Here's the way it looks from the room at the top. Casts quite a shadow, huh? Watch out for low clouds. And watch out for this rugged character and but such a common face. This is New York Harbor, first navigated by Verrazzano in 1524, then explored in 1609 by Henry Hudson, who modestly named the river for himself and shortly thereafter sailed back to the Old World to report to his Dutch bosses that he had found a pretty fair hunk of real estate, thus setting the stage for what today is the greatest parking problem in history. Hey, isn't that a tender farewell? A fool to go. Washington Square, last outpost of civilization before heading into the wilds of Greenwich Village. An excellent example of how New York blends the old with the new. Some of these Washington Square buildings are just as they were 100 years ago. Of course, the plumbing has been changed. While the cement is hardly dry in some of these air-conditioned apartment buildings. Washington Square is best remembered for a girl named Rose, whose last name nobody remembers. Yes, the old and the new, side by side. This fellow's outfit is a good combination of the old and the new, the traditional and the modern. You know, he looks a little bit like me. Of course, my face has more character. They say that when it comes to food, if you can't find it in New York, it doesn't exist. From sukiyaki to blintzes. Tonight we might sup at La Fonda del Sol, one of the newest and smartest dining spots.
These sights and sounds are only a part of one of the most astonishing and complicated areas in the world. An area filled with more wonders and problems than any comparable place in all of man's history. 1 American in 10 lives here, and if you were to take all their automobiles and park them end to end, that line of cars would circle the earth twice. You may be wondering where in the United States such a city exists. As a single city, a city whose name we would... Rivers were the main highways of commerce to the interior, and the cities in better locations became busy ports, with New York at the mouth of the Hudson River, Philadelphia on the Delaware. Today, each of these cities still serves as an important gateway to our country. Nearly 1/2 of America's foreign trade, over 100 million tons each year, is loaded and unloaded at these great ports. New York City, with its 500 miles of waterfront, is the greatest shipping center in the world. A ship enters or leaves every 10 minutes. To efficiently transport goods to and from these superhighways and airlines, Megalopolis produces and distributes much of what is used by the nation and the world. Its many businesses offer a great variety of jobs which attract many people to this area. Most of the nation's clothes are made here, with the garment industry employing fashion. Some of the food which pours into this enormous market is transported overseas by ship. Many ships are built in megalopolis. One of these the skylines of the big cities are being changed practically overnight. Many large companies have their headquarters or home office in megalopolis. Here, millions of white-collar employees are engaged in the Wall Street in New York City is the business and financial center of the Western world. The pulse of national and international trade is regulated here in its banks, investment corporations, and all over the nation and the world. These men are recording the buying and selling of stocks on the floor of the exchange. Elsewhere in megalopolis, women are also going about the business of buying and selling. In the elegance of New York's Fifth Avenue stores, the prices are high, while there are tremendous department stores that cater to smaller budgets. And as elsewhere, even with the competition of corporate giants, there's always room for private enterprise and ingenuity. Yes, business thrives in megalopolis, for the same millions who are producers and sellers are also buyers and consumers. But so many people also create problems. One of the most critical is the problem of housing. As the cities of megalopolis grew more heavily populated, residential building in them did not keep pace. Now a substantial number of people are forced to live in run-down neighborhoods with overcrowded conditions. The large cities of megalopolis are trying to correct this unfortunate situation by constructing new housing. The opposite for them. Fast trains carry the commuters to the heart of the city and back each day. Once within the heart of the cities, travel on crowded streets becomes a serious problem. To avoid using private means of transportation, millions of people rely on public facilities. To meet these needs, megalopolis has an extensive system of buses, trolleys, ferry boats, and underground railways. The subway system of New York City is the largest and most heavily traveled in existence. Nearly 4.5 million passengers use the subway every day. That is more than all the people in Maine, Kansas, and Colorado together. If crowds bother you, it is definitely advisable to stay out of the subway during the rush hours. More than people have to be transported in megalopolis. The larger cities have 9 private universities, such as Columbia in New York City, and Princeton, about halfway between New York and Philadelphia. With the combined talents and money of many people, megalopolis can support many valuable cultural facilities, such as the Guggenheim Museum in New York City. The museums encourage interest in the visual arts. Their collections include life in megalopolis offers something for everybody. There are activities to suit everyone's taste for entertainment. Broadway in New York City is famous the world over for its musical comedy, illuminated billboards, serious drama, and the latest movies. For other city dwellers, an afternoon out of doors may seem more pleasant. Nature has been preserved in megalopolis by the establishment of parks. Here, families can spend a leisurely afternoon away from the confinement of apartment living. In 300 years, 3 small port settlements have become busy seaports. New York on the Hudson River, Philadelphia on the Delaware River, become more crowded. Every need is magnified. The problems of transportation and housing are becoming so acute that they threaten to choke the vitality of the megalopolis. While building huge apartments offers one solution, many city folk take a second alternative and
swing down Broadway and you come to the brightest spot of all. This is Times Square, where traffic from Broadway funnels into that of 7th Avenue, where an average of 1,500,000 people pass through every day. Times Square becomes the Great White Way at night when all its spectacular lights go on. For this is the entertainment center. All of New York's leading stage and screen theaters are located along this part of Broadway and adjoining crosstown streets. New York City, the sightseer's paradise, the greatest man-made wonder of the world.
Hello down there. From up here, I look down on the greatest city in the world, New York, my city. I am the Empire State Building, but I am as alive as the city I see. My city, with all its magnificent displays of color, and all its drabness, too. I can hear the great cacophony of sound that is the very heartbeat of my city. Oh, I know what they say. I hear it all the time. New York's a great place to visit, but I wouldn't want to live there. Well, I can tell you this. If you want to see all there is to see in New York, you might just as well live here. It takes a lifetime. Something else I've heard. I've heard New York called just a pile of rocks. That's not. New York is alive. It works and breathes and speaks and sings. New York laughs and cries and plays. And New York loves. It has a heart and a soul. Where does this life force come from? From the plasma of people that constantly pulses through its veins. Over 8 million teeming, multiplying corpuscles, always on the move. They move over my city, going and coming. And they move under it, coming and going, in a complex of tunnels that would shame the catacombs. They move through my city in cars and trucks. They move in taxicabs. They move in diesel-powered buses. And even in conveyances with the original horsepower. And they move around my city in ferries and tugs, in small craft and ocean liners. Of course, I don't get around much, but I don't have to. 35,000 people come to me every day. I have a special place in this city. I was born here. I was always tall for my age. In fact, I was born 1,250 feet high. And I have kept pointing up toward the sky, which is, of course, up toward hope. There is another symbol of hope in my city, in New York, the starkly impressive United Nations. And so now we are three, we symbols of hope. One looks out across an ocean. One faces a river. And I stand smack in the middle of this sprawling, towering town of mine, where magnificent mansions watch the big cars go by, and the teeming tenement sees a man pass with his worldly goods. where the stately architecture of the Museum of Natural History and the Metropolitan Museum of Art contrasts with the startling forms of Frank Lloyd Wright's Guggenheim Museum, where the majestic quiet of the cloisters and its medieval gardens and treasures competes for attention with the noisy bustle and cascade of color that is a Greenwich Village art show. And where the city center's beautiful music harmonizes with that of Lincoln Center. From up here, I listen to all the mingled sounds of New York. I can hear the morning music of the great Cathedral of St. Patrick's. And of the Cathedral of St. John the Divine. I can hear the evening music of Temple Emmanuel. And then the late, very late at night music of New York. There are other sounds of New York, old sounds, reverberations from the past. If you listen closely, you can hear George Washington read his first inaugural address from the very spot of the inauguration. You can hear Nathan Hale's plaintive voice, "I only regret that I have but one life to lose for my country." And George M. Cohan, "Give my regards to Broadway." Sounds from the past blended with sounds of today, sounds of auto horns and subway wheels. New York speaks with the moans of mighty liners and the throaty coos of myriad pigeons and the awesome resonance of church bells. The sounds of New York are the sounds of the drillers into the rock, of the ironworkers, and all the clangor that says, "My skyline, my ever-changing skyline, it's changing again." But mostly sounds mean people. People who sail the largest ships of the world. Glamour ships, the queens of the ocean. And other glamorous ships, smaller, sailed by smaller sailors. But nevertheless, sailors who also have their code, the first principle of which is no strings attached. There are those sailors I see in New York who sail on an older type vessel, Noah's Ark up in Central Park. Noah never had so many willing hands to keep the animals fed. And who said only Santa Claus could have white reindeer? Yes, New York is people. And I guess if any one type outnumbers any other, it's the shoppers. They're everywhere. I see them at Macy's down below. And at B. Altman's down at the corner. And up the street, Tiffany, Bonwood Teller, Best's, Harry Winston, Bergdorf Goodman, The Tailored Woman, Lord & Taylor, and back to my other next-door neighbor, Gimbel's. Does Gimbel's tell Macy's? The truth is, they both tell me. Macy's and Gimbel's are both good sports, but so are most of the other people I see down there. You can tell it by the sounds you hear from Yankee Stadium. It's in the clean, crisp click of the skates at Rockefeller Plaza. In the swish and thump of the tennis games.
in the enthusiasm of kids playing soccer. And in all the varied sounds of the sport of kings. An ancient relative of mine, the Tower of Babel, is said to have heard many tongues spoken at the same time, but not so many as float up and swirl about my tower. The sounds of language that come from Chinatown and their exotic flavor as they rise from Pell Street with those of the French, the Italian, the Swiss, the Dutchman, and the Deutschman, Korean, Spaniard, Irishman, Indian, and hundreds more, including New Yorkers. And New York eats in as many languages as it speaks. It orders bouillabaisse, and smorgasbord, and Wiener Schnitzel, mutton chops, and sauerbraten, and scallopini, beef stroganoff, and egg foo young, the way out foods, and a plain ham sandwich and apple pie. And the aromas of all these creations mingle with those of thousands of delicatessens, which are in turn seasoned with the smell of the salt air wafted in from the harbor, and the arid freshwater breezes that blow across the lake from Central Park. All blended with the year-round scent of flowers which are everywhere. And even the rather dubious odors of the largest, noisiest, most colorful fish market anywhere. It's all part of my city, my ever-changing city, from the Fulton Fish Market at dawn to Brooklyn at night. And at night, the lights come on, shining brightly everywhere. In times, Broadway, which isn't Broadway Street or Broadway Avenue, just Broadway. The spawning ground of so many great plays and dramas and musicals, and the burial ground of others, the showcase of rave performances, and the unreachable goal of the almost talented. I feel very close to Broadway, for I'm in show business myself. From my antennas, I send out the signals of all the television channels beamed at New York. I'm really a theater, too. Over 1.5 million people a year visit my 2 observatories. One 86 stories up, the other 102. They come from all over the world. They collect and take home souvenirs. But they really come to look down from the 8th wonder of the world into the most wonderful city in the world, my city. The city O. Henry calls Baghdad on the Hudson. The city E.B. White says can't possibly work, but admits it does. The only city where the world's tallest building stands out like a beacon of friendship, and its message of freedom to visitors and homecomers approaching by land and sea and air. The only city where a 1,472-foot tall building can personally invite you to come up, way up, and see me sometime.
Dans un bon hôtel, nous embrassons la ville d'Urbias. New York, ville immense. Où aller? D'abord descendre dans la rue. On suivra sa fantaisie au ras du sol. Entre les immeubles jaillit la ligne audacieuse du gratte-ciel de Radio City qui va se perdre dans la douce lumière du ciel.
Couchés au sommet d'un gratte-ciel, comme sur un pic, nous découvrons l'étrange beauté de New York, cette parade de lumière et d'ombre. L'Empire State Building règne sur le paysage urbain comme un colosse sur une fourmilière humaine. Le regard plonge dans les rues qui s'étirent et se croisent à l'infini. L'architecture moderne de l'aéroport de New York a de quoi satisfaire le touriste le plus assoiffé de futurisme. Nous survolons en hélicoptère les flots gris et changeants de l'Hudson. Hudson majestueux. Salut amical à la grande sœur de la Statue de la Liberté du pont de Grenelle. Sur Wall Street, nous jetons le regard du sage qui voit les choses d'un peu plus haut. À propos de sagesse, voici le siège des Nations Unies. Allons suivre une session. Je la raconterai à mes petits-enfants. Ça leur fera un récit moins belliqueux que les campagnes de mon grand-père. Aujourd'hui, nous prenons le train. Soit dit en passant, on nous concède.
Okay. For a wonderful wife, happy anniversary. Here's another idea. If you get into New York early, you'll have some time to see the big city. You know, taking a few shows.
Jim and Laura really did the town and saw all the sights. The great ship moves outward toward the sea, past the skyline of Manhattan. It is an island of pleasure for every passenger. Each seeks something different. Lucy and Bill Grant want 13 days of rest and relaxation. Bob and Marie Morgan look forward to a perfect honeymoon. For Sally Warner, it is a long planned for and special holiday. Rick Foster simply wants a great 2-week vacation.
I don't know whether Jim noticed it or not.
If there's one thing America has plenty of, it's open spaces. Mountains, plains, valleys, lakes, you know, nature and all that sort of thing. But somehow most of the open spaces seem to be out of town. As you get closer into a big city, the buildings get tighter and tighter, and the open spaces get scarcer and scarcer. Sometimes you feel it's a mighty lucky pigeon that gets a chance to spread its wings out all the way. The scarcer open spaces are, the more precious they become. City people are drawn to them like thirsty creatures to a fresh, cool spring. They seem to fill some very deep human need. What is it? How best can it be satisfied?
We're considering how to live in a city with Eugene Raskin, former professor of architecture and city planning at Columbia University.
Until a generation or so ago, most Americans lived on farms or in small towns. As a people, we haven't quite learned yet how to make the most of living in a city.
Of the many important aspects, the one which we will consider now is the use and enjoyment of open spaces. The centers of all our great cities fill up in the mornings and empty out in the evenings. And all day long, it's rush, rush, rush. Now, the fact that a city is bustling, crowded, is part of its appeal. Among other things, it's what we came to the city to find. But the pressure has to be taken off once in a while. Otherwise, it becomes too continuous and eventually exhausting. Today, the need for open spaces in the hearts of our cities is greater than ever, although the number of people who actually live here has been decreasing steadily. Those who work in the city's heart often live outside. Some commute long miles to reach green countryside, but they often leave home so early and get home so late. They have no chance to see or feel the sun except on their lunch hours. Waterfronts that are kept open to the public make city open spaces of the grandest sort. Yet even when such natural settings give city dwellers a chance to breathe and feel the sun, most of the day they find themselves trapped between walls, unless there is some small open space close at hand, to pause between appointments, to chat with a friend, to toss a ball. Most American cities were laid out on a gridiron pattern of square blocks that makes it hard to create open spaces. A few have been produced by accident. New York's Times Square, for instance, exists because Broadway crosses 7th Avenue at a diagonal. If Manhattan's gridiron plan had been consistent, who knows if there would have been a Great White Way at all. The open space here, to handle the crowds and give viewing room for the big signs which are its trademark, makes Times Square one of the greatest marketplaces in the world. As a matter of fact, the earliest urban open spaces were probably marketplaces. Unfortunately for the visual excitement of our cities, they are fighting a losing battle with traffic czars, city inspectors, and supermarkets. It's all part of a general trend to banish everything from our streets except automobiles. In the days before air conditioning, city dwellers were forced to live in the open a good bit more than we do today. Streets were the only open spaces most American cities provided that were close at hand. The small parks we've inherited, with few exceptions, were designed for monumental purposes or to adorn some important building rather than simply for use by people. When we did go in for parks, they were usually of the large variety, well out of the teeming neighborhoods. Rock Creek Park in Washington, New York Central Park, Fairmount Park in Philadelphia, all magnificently laid out in their day and functioning largely as escapes from the city rather than part of it. So long as horse-drawn vehicles were the main means of transport, these large parks were used primarily by the rich. The poor, which means most city people, would have to hike out on Sundays or holidays for their occasional picnic or club outing. Then came an invention that put large parks within reach of anybody who had a nickel. Some trolley companies built their own parks at the end of the line. You had a picnic under the trees while a band played. You had a splash in the pond, and took snapshots of Aunt Abigail for the family album. Then came another invention. City dwellers could go still further for their open space. Today, the freeways we have built as escape routes from the city cut up and dominate many of our finest large parks. For many city-dwelling families, large parks still provide the only views of green and sky and open water they can afford. The only one most can even find. The problem is that we continue to run and staff most large city parks as though there had been no change in their function since they were fashionable promenades for the rich. It's no wonder that decay and lawlessness have become major problems here, and our attempts at limitation compound the problems rather than solve them. When open spaces in cities aren't fully used, they soon become places people are afraid to use at all. The park at night becomes a place of terror rather than romance.
Eventually, most large parks will have to be redesigned to meet present-day needs and conditions. I am suggesting that not all urban open spaces are successful. Let's find out why some are and some aren't.
So, back to the real city, which means people, people and more people. In former times, the centers of most large cities were markets, courts, forums, open spaces where city folk and peasants met to trade, exchange the latest rumors, and watch things happen. Here, feast days were celebrated. Thieves were hanged, kings beheaded. In those days, national events were seen in the Plaza rather than on television. Today's city spectacle is of a different sort. Less concentrated, perhaps, but as varied as ever. Buildings going up, buildings coming down, and everyone either watching the show, being part of it, or both. The streets of Central City have again become a place for play, display, and pageantry. But when you keep parades off the street, as many city police traffic controllers want to do, when you cut sidewalks down to make room for one more lane of traffic, you are denying space to city life itself.
As a general rule, successful urban open spaces are related to, in fact, part of, the bustle of a city's activities. The size of a city open space is far less important than how it functions where it is.
New York's WPIX Plaza, on the corner of 42nd Street and 2nd Avenue, is an outstanding example of well-placed, well-designed urban open space, especially on a sunny day. Full credit should go to the owners and designers of the office building it adorns for creating and maintaining it. For contrast, let's look at another plaza, only 4 blocks away. It's 20 times bigger than WPIX. It is kept clean, it's carefully policed, and needs to be. For almost nobody comes here because there's nothing to look at, nothing to do. None of the big city action that flows around you as you sit in WPIX Plaza. Every city neighborhood needs open spaces, just so people can rest or stroll about and see a bit of green. When well placed, these are usually well used. Washington Square on a busy day reminds you that even open spaces could use some open spaces. One reason why Washington Square works so well as a city open space is because so many different kinds of people find so many different kinds of things to do here. Washington Square Park observes what I like to call the 3 rights of man. The right to sit down, the right to get a drink of water, and the right to use free public plumbing. Designers of city parks could learn a lot by watching the ways people use or fail to use the open spaces they've been provided with in the past. It's generally assumed peace and green are what are wanted most. Some do want these things, but by no means all. By Green Park standards, this narrow strip of dirt and concrete along Houston Street near the Bowery should be a wasteland. Instead, it's one of the liveliest open spaces on Manhattan for at least 8 months of the year. The Italians who brought us this game of bocce and are teaching it to the Puerto Ricans have had centuries of experience as urban dwellers. We could learn a great deal from them about how to enjoy open spaces in a city. Down the block, another group of local residents prove that summer and city living go together fine, without benefit of penthouse, pool, or air conditioning, when the city gives them tables in the sun. Nobody has yet designed a city open space quite so universally used and appreciated as the Stoop. Why? Well, it's both public and private. It's yours, yet you aren't cut off from anyone who passes. You aren't missing anything. By just sitting there, you have a feeling that you belong to the neighborhood and it belongs to you. Sidewalk games flourish in the city, often in spite of the fact that there are playgrounds close at hand. It's not just that the kids are contrary. They're like the rest of us. They want to be in the middle of things. Most neighborhood fairs that once turned drab streets into worlds of gaudy light have been killed by traffic regulations, and our cities are duller, if somewhat quieter, for their loss. New York's San Gennaro Festival is a welcome exception. Well, nobody goes home hungry, at least. Most of the old street festivals are gone, as well as many of the streets themselves. They don't build stoops anymore. But this does not mean city people have lost the hankerings these things once satisfied. However coldly, cleanly modern our buildings, we still like to sit out front and watch the world go by. People will find the unlikeliest places to sit, even when the architects seem to have done their best to discourage them. Some buildings reject people. Others welcome us. Across Park Avenue is the Seagram building, whose forecourt was planned to invite people to linger. In its contemporary way, this is just one great big old-fashioned stoop. In half a dozen years, the Seagram Plaza has become one of the most used, respected, and loved open spaces in New York. Time Life's row of fountains is another particularly favored new-style city stoop. Since this area is private property, it must be guarded and maintained by the owners at their own expense, which is considerable. But forward-looking managements are beginning to recognize that a building with a well-used open space has come a long way toward being what is called a good address.
To be successful, an open urban space has to be appreciated, like anything else, which means it must come as a reward. The open space should be preceded, possibly followed, by unopened space. That is, streets or walks which are relatively narrow and tight by comparison, so that the square or plaza or whatever it is comes as a contrast, a reward, an anticipated or remembered goodie. An open field in the middle of a prairie would hardly do the trick. No contrast.
Perhaps most important of all is that the space should be felt to be enclosed, however contradictory that may sound. It must be part of the city, embraced by the city. One must feel that the city has paused and encircled this precious area, keeping it as part of itself. Nowhere is this better seen than in the lovely sculpture garden of the Museum of Modern Art. What could be more delightful than this oasis of beauty in the middle of the raucous city? The Plaza in New York is an almost ideal urban open space, framed as it is on three sides by tall buildings, with an opening to the north on Central Park. In contrast, here's a housing development, like ones you've seen by the hundreds. There is plenty of space as such, mind you, but it is shapeless, unenclosed, unframed, and one feels unloved. It is not so much open space as leftover space. It's space that doesn't welcome you, although it may not go quite so far as to reject you, as does this lawn at the United Nations, and in 2 languages. Let's go back to the plaza and notice another thing about a well-designed urban space. The plaza has a center of interest, its fountain and great statue. Every urban place needs something to form a nucleus, a point to which all other points relate. These things help to give open space shape and organic unity. Washington Square has its arch as an identifying symbol. Such things help to create an image in your mind. Gradually, with use, the space itself gains personality for you. It becomes some place, not just any place. It becomes not just a park, but your park. Taking our rules one at a time, let's look at Rockefeller Center. First, it has a strong center of interest in the sunken skating rink, which doubles as a restaurant in the summer. Next, you are well aware of the main plaza before reaching it. You see it along the flowered promenade with its pleasant seats and intriguing storefronts. And finally, its shape is strongly defined by the buildings that frame it. This is truly designed open space, nothing left over about it. But you don't have to be a corporation to get yourself some open space. Behind this block of converted townhouses in Greenwich Village, neighbors have joined forces to throw their backyards together, forming a pleasant garden far bigger than they could afford individually, and with no real loss of privacy. From above, which is where most city gardens are viewed, even fences don't give you privacy. What you lose by tearing down fences is just fences. Here's another example, this one in Philadelphia. The people on this little street have turned it into a sort of mall, which they can enjoy together. Every house is decorated with its own window box, while beyond, a vacant lot has been turned into a community garden. The children have done the work themselves. It's truly theirs, so they respect it. Perhaps the most pathetic effort on the part of city people to find open space is the phenomenon called the private terrace, which is rarely more than an oversized windowsill. Usually they succeed only in intensifying that feeling of isolation, which is the curse of city life in our day as in no other. How much more successful is this little garden, hardly any bigger than a so-called terrace, but to which personal attention and creativity have been applied. Nothing mass-produced could ever have the warmth and charm of this garden. And the word privacy doesn't enter into it. This is something that gives pleasure to the neighbors as well as the owner. People in the city have a desperate need to feel part of their surroundings, to personalize them. Yet the old ways of doing this are fast disappearing. Nowadays, neighborhood identity must be found beyond these bleak facades. When an open space
be it square, park, plaza, market, or what have you, achieves a distinctive character, something that is completely its own, different from all others. The people who are drawn to it and use it learn to recognize its personality and grow fond of it. They come back again and again until they themselves become part of its atmosphere and personality. And it is this combination of places and living people which results in urban open spaces that are organic living parts of a city. Neither the spaces without the people nor the people without the spaces will do the trick. It's not a question of one or the other. It's a question of both or nothing. To sum up, an open space in the city must first relate to the denser areas around it by being seen from them. Secondly, it should have a sense of shape or enclosure by the buildings around it. Otherwise, it might as well be a meadow. And third, it must have a center of interest, both in terms of form, such as fountains or what have you, and in terms of human activity. After all, being human, it's human beings that interest us most.
Museums like the Metropolitan Museum of Art and the Museum of Modern Art will work with the fair in joint activities. And to the millions who will visit the fair, New York City extends its welcome. The shops on the avenues, the new hotels, restaurants, the sidewalk cafes, the hit shows, the tinsel of Broadway, the animals at the zoo, a park in springtime, the view from the tallest building like a picture postcard, the United Nations, the libraries, the art galleries, Jones Beach in summer and ice skating in the fall. To millions of visitors from all over the world, New York will say, welcome. And on the Flushing Meadow, the stage is set for a new fair.
American Airlines flight number 6707 Astrojet from Los Angeles.
All right, lady, take it already. All right, now what else do you want? Now, let's
Sailing up the East River. We're doing about 10 knots. Manhattan's on the left and Brooklyn's on the right. It's salty water and it's polluted water. And the way we're going now is the way you go to Pellgate along the coast. And there in front of us is the United Nations, the new spiritual capital of the world, the Secretariat building. And coming up now on the left, very fashionable, very swank, very la-di-da, Sutton Place.
Say when, please. All right, a little on the other end. Say when. All right, little cream mint. And there we are. It's all yours. Now.
Now was your best object, the argument of your praise, the balm of your age. I expect you with so monstrous so many What's another pizza? Yeah.
New York, a city of ships, a city of people. Get up with the dawn to see the city when it's quiet. Quiet, but never fully at rest. Soon the streets, the waterfront, the rivers of the harbor will race with life. Early morning ferries cross the river carrying workers to thousands of jobs in the port district. for New York is the busiest harbor city in the world. What a day this one's going to be. Welcome to commuter crowds. Join the morning rush of New York on its way to work. 13 million people. And the jobs the port provides support 1/4 of them all. But it's not only a work day for the harbor, it's a school day too. Would be transferred to outlying areas. Of all the plans for modernizing the harbor, none is more spectacular than what is happening here on Manhattan's west side. By 1970 or thereabouts, the World Trade Center will be completed on this site. The world's tallest building, 110 stories high, will change Manhattan's skyline and the port as well. Here, 50,000 people will work to improve international trade. Plans for the future and echoes of the past. This is Eleports of America.
Implementation of Tin Pan Alley and the development of music centers across the country, New York City still remains a major center of the music business and a stronghold of traditional popular music. American theater music, enriched by the contributions of such greats as Jerome Kern, George Gershwin, Cole Porter, and others, still predominates on Broadway, and as it has for many years, continues to be a major influence on popular music. One of our current writers of show music is Richard Rogers.
Of course, my area is Broadway. This is where I've lived my life and where I'm still working. Is if you're trying to show a relationship between a boy and a girl, to simplify it, if they sing a short chorus of a song,
It's a great place in the daytime, but there's nothing like New York at night. When that sun drops down behind Jersey, Fun City really turns on. Nothing can stop a New York night, except maybe the arrival of the next day. This is the place to be, right here. George M. Cohn wrote a song, "Give My Regards to Broadway." He's the same guy who said, when you're not on Broadway, you're camping out. Down in Greenwich Village, the New York night is, well, it's different. There's usually a message in the song down here. You see, the village is where the young people come to have their say, to communicate.
ニューヨークのケネディ国際空港は世界中で旅客機の最も多く出入りする空港という統計が出ていますが、これは大西洋横断がいかに多く行われているかを裏付けています。あなたがもし初めておいでになったなら、まず大空に突き刺さるようにそびえているエンパイアステートビルに驚かれることでしょう。どんなレンズを使ってもこの姿をすっぽり捉えることは不可能なほどです。パンアメリカン航空のビルも同じように巨大なビルの一つです。また指先のようなクライスラービル、ラジオシティビルもニューヨークを形作っているビルの一つです。しかしコンクリートを空へ積み上げたビルばかりがニューヨークではないのです。ここリンカーンセンターはとても平和で静かな広場です。そして足を伸ばしてグッゲンハイム美術館を覗いてみてください。円形の建物の中に入ると螺旋階段が伸びて、人々は絵を楽しみながら上まで楽に歩いて上がれます。ブルックリンブリッジも変わらぬ姿を見せています。船でマンハッタン島を一周すれば、ニューヨークの新しい姿を一層強く印象付けられることでしょう。国連ビルが一番美しく見えるのもこの辺りからです。ニューヨークの街に慣れてくると、そのコントラストの良さにお気づきになるでしょう。大都会ニューヨークにもこんなに居心地の良いところもあるのです。歩道の絵描き先にはパリやロンドン、アムステルダムにも見られるような気安さがあります。ニューヨークの人たちほど郊外の生活の好きな人種はありません。忙しいウォール街の目と鼻の先にある静かな別世界、それがワシントン広場です。ニューヨークをぶらつくのにはお金を使わなくても済みます。誰でもパレードを見るのは好きですし、ロックフェラーセンターに行けば必ず催し物がタダで見られます。あなたは街の景色に見とれて歩いているうちに、再びたくさん並んだビルディングの塊、ビジネスセンターにぶつかります。ロックフェラーセンターのタワー展望台は静かな景色を楽しむのには最適の場所です。セントラルパークは観光客の皆さんよりもむしろニューヨークっ子にとって切っても切れない存在です。この公園での最近の人気者は何といってもサイクリングです。しかし未だに馬車で走ることも人々に人気があります。またニューヨークを馬で乗り回すこともできます。もっとも同じニューヨークでもここはニューヨーク州なのですが、タイムズスクエアはユニークで絶えず変わり、それは全く大ニューヨークそのものです。どこを向いても飽きることはありません。そしてあなたはこのニューヨークの素晴らしさをいつでも味わうことができるのです。
is an American city. The world has never seen anything quite like it. Each day the city is changed by its people. Each day it is almost the same. And yet the arrival of the Robert Millers of the world make it different from the day before. They arrive for work in an endless river of automobiles, trains, and buses. They come by the thousands. White men, black men, yellow men. They come surrounded by others, yet each man travels alone with his private dream of success. Each day, taking for granted the incredible economic and cultural opportunities that await him in business, art, politics, industry, and most of all, in a standard of life unknown outside these cities. And each day, with his creative energy, he builds for tomorrow. The fathers and mothers of most of these people were not born here. They came from Russia, Germany, Italy, Africa, and China. They also came from rural America. They came to work. Came because they knew the future was the city, and because their strength and ideas were needed to develop our growing city's natural resources. But as in every historic step in man's journey toward a better life, the drastic change from rural to city life created many problems. The methods and institutions of rural societies that were brought to the cities broke down, crushed by the vastly different needs of crowded and industrialized city life. But despite all their problems, cities offered men for the first time in history the choice to be whatever their special abilities and talents allowed them to be. Between 7 and 10 a.m. each day, over 2 million people enter and leave New York City, most of them by subway. Yet the most powerful force changing the American city is the automobile. Streetcars have disappeared, and buses are proving a poor substitute. Commuter train service, worse each year. Subways, overcrowded and dirtier than ever. Industrial waste and new highways pouring more cars into the city each year are raising air pollution to dangerous new levels. The situation is so critical. In 30 million immigrants poured into the industrialized cities of the East. But many immigrants did not know how to live in cities, and often they simply threw their garbage out of their windows. Inadequate sewers and poor sanitation spread diseases and increased death rates in congested slum areas called fever nests. But low wages forced immigrants to live wherever they could. In 1845, Dr. John Griscom conducted one of the first investigations of urban health problems.
We are parties to the degradation of the poor. We suffer the landlord to stow them like cattle in pens and to compel them to swallow poison with every breath.
Taking John Griscom's concerned advice, New York organized a Board of Health, the true beginning of our modern public health and sanitation movements. Better medical attention and clean streets were just some of the reasons why our cities continued to grow. But like human children, our cities had growing pains. And the most tragic evidence of this was often seen in the faces of tenement children. A young Presbyterian minister named Charles Loring Brace who was later to found the Children's Aid Society, visited his city's tenements and reported what he found.
On a trip to any place you dream.
When I go to get something for my mother, I usually go down 9th Avenue. To all the stores along the streets, you know, they got everything there. Everything anybody could need. Everybody speaking different languages. It's really just like the UN. Figures they're going to tear this down, too. They always tear down everything that's old-fashioned. I sure like to listen to all those people talk. Near the market they have this big bus station where every day at 5 o'clock people rush out to the sticks. You know, go home and everything. But they come back every day. You know, I wonder what they come here for. They must come here to get rich or something. But if they were rich, I mean, what would they be doing riding buses? Only some people make it, though. You know, one guy on television keeps on telling us that New York is dying. But the people just keep on coming and coming.
Saturday afternoon I usually go places with my father. Sometimes we drive, sometimes we take a trolley, sometimes we take a bus. A lot of times we go through the Golden Triangle, where they're building up all these big... I see you!
On Saturday, when I'm not out playing ball, I go over to see my guitar. It's not really mine yet, you know, but I will own it someday. It's 48th Street. It's called Tin Pan Alley. They're going to wreck that down, too. I tell you, it's progress. Around here, if you really open your ears, you can hear the music of the stars. You know, up and down these streets, sometimes I can see some of the biggest names in show business. They all end up here sometime. You know, I'm not sure whether I want to be a lawyer or a star. But I got time.
No, I'm not from...
My dad's working down near the Battery. There was a big hole in the concrete. Down here, it used to be you could buy radios, tubes, wires. Gone. Now it's going to be the biggest building in the world. Bigger than the Empire State Building. Sometimes the foreman takes me up to see my dad. He's working on the batting part. This building's going to be so tall that they're going to have to put big red searchlights on top so the planes won't crash into it. I think ships are going to...
Right down here, they buy and sell all the vegetables for the entire Southeast.
I've been to downtown Manhattan, and down here they buy and sell everything. I've been on the old riverboat, the Gateway Cooper. I've been to the...
Complete pop region in the United States.
where most people live in or near a city. The region from Boston, Massachusetts to Washington, D.C. is an almost continuous series of cities, including the largest city in the United States, New York City. Why do so many people live in the cities of the Northeast? How does the urbanization of the Northeast affect the lives of people who live there? Why did they come and settle here? The Northeast was... The Northeast, especially New York City, is the financial center of the United States. Many national and international businesses have their main offices here. The concentration of people and cities in the Northeast has many advantages.
America, over 190 years young and still building.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Hello. And then I felt my heart beating. I was with a young lady. I looked into her eyes, soft pools like moonlight. And I said to myself, is this love? Is this love? And she looked at me and said, oh, darling, I think I'm falling in love with you. And I said, don't. I'm no good. Don't love me.
Some of them are awfully nice, and I don't blame any of them for what they have become. I blame the older generation. We are responsible for what they are today. They're fighting us. They're not satisfied with the world we created for them.
what parent would like to have what parent would like to have their children hanging around with friends of a different, well, let's not say different, in other words, different color. I guess we're all prejudiced in a sense. I guess we are. But it's very hard to. I wouldn't like him to pal around with. I wouldn't like him to pal around with colored boys. He should stick to his own kind. As far as I'm concerned, they're as good as any other, except for their color. I get along just fine with them. Of course, I don't have too much business with them other than business.
This is an examination of sex in the 60s. What is different about this scene? What changes are taking place?
That's quite literally. And changes in the 60s are once again completely different. We're seeing an explosion of sexual expression. Again, not just necessarily the in-bed expression, but in all of our communications media, for instance. And in all of our waking thoughts, and waking music, and our waking reading, there's this tremendous explosion of almost obsession with sex, the genital aspects of sex. For example, you can see it in motion pictures. European films, and now American films, increasingly are showing nudity, couples in bed together, and they're dealing with formerly taboo subjects like homosexuality.